Good morning, Bob. Welcome to the city of tigers and oranges. Hope you had a great flight from the States to Nagpur.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, excited to meet the team for the first time, and looking forward to our conversation.
So, Bob, having spent so many years in the medical device industry, and now there is an advent of artificial intelligence. So, I had this series of questions, that we would be discussing today on the podcast. So, my first question to you is, how can medical device manufacturers use AI, and what, as per you, are the top AI use cases that a manufacturer should be looking into?
Good questions. I think for the most part, when you look at AI and its adoption right now, it's very exciting technology. It also is technology that is, by virtue of its newness, somewhat like the internet when the internet first was developed.
Right.
So there are questions that come about the efficacy, the utilization, where its benefits would be. And in the hospital setting, which is where the medical device manufacturers are promoting and selling their products, there are considerations that are very important to address, but also within the medical device companies' products themselves and within their own businesses, they have operational efficiencies that they have to understand and improve upon. They know they have issues, and they many times don't have the time to solve those various issues because they are too busy being busy.
Yeah.
And many times we use the phrase, we can't see the forest through the trees. And unfortunately, for many business executives, they know they've got business opportunities to improve efficiencies, yet they're so busy, they don't have time to really address that. So as I look at AI, I look at it in two different areas. One is, how will an end user customer of a medical device company use the product? What are the challenges and the pain points that they're facing? And then from their own business side of things, where are efficiencies that could be improved upon, operational efficiencies in various departments? And surprisingly, almost every area of their business can be improved. And with AI having such capacity to take voice and data and text and take away redundant tasks that humans are spending time on, and allow for the algorithms to do that for them. That allows them to spend more time, in the case of a doctor, to spend more time with his patient. In the case of a business, to spend more time operationalizing and improving, and in the engineering area, developing new products as opposed to sustaining products. So these are some of the general ideas that we talk about, and that in our industry, in the healthcare industry itself, we are addressing patients. And we are addressing doctors and the caregivers that take care of those patients. And while we have a wealth of data, we are inadequate when it comes to what to do with that data and how we share that information and what the challenges really are for the doctors and the caregivers. So, as I look at the use cases that are really predominant right now, utilization of AI to help a clinician, a predictive algorithm, to help improve outcomes is something that they are asking for and they are accepting of, as it's being described as augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. It has to be augmented because you cannot take the human out of the equation. And so as we discuss things with clinicians and nurses, and we ask them what are their pain points, what are the biggest challenges that they're facing, and in most cases they will say, I do not have the time to take care of the patient the way I would like to. I'm too busy charting. I'm too busy documenting. And all of this data, this wealth of data, I'm unable to utilize it effectively. And as such, I spend more time inputting data, making sure the data I put in is accurate, rather than taking care of my patient. So this is a big challenge in the clinical setting, which is very different, obviously, than the business side. Right. So I think it would be great if we just start with the clinical setting itself and the areas where AI will be very, very helpful. And first one was utilization of predictive algorithms. There are current companies out right now that are already utilizing AI to help a physician or a caregiver improve that process. The workflow process is something that's very challenging for all hospital administrators. Nurses and doctors are working overtime. They're suffering from burnout and fatigue, and they say, I don't have the time to take care of the patient the way I need to, so help me come up with a tool that will allow me to spend more time with them so I can improve my outcomes, so I can improve my patient care. And patient satisfaction is also something that is incredibly important to the clinician, to the caregiver, and to the hospital-wide system. So there's an awful lot that we can talk about on the patient setting side of things. Any tool that can help with clinical decision-making. And what I mean by that is the doctor is going to make the final decision.
Of
But
course.
if the information can be coalesced, can be put together in an organized format so that the doctor can say, based on my patient's histories, based on their last few visits, based on their hemodynamic information, what I'm seeing now is a certain trend. And that trend may be that they are deteriorating, or it may be that they are taking certain medications that are improving their outcomes. That information is not always so readily available to them. So their biggest quest is give me information so I can make better decisions, so I can improve my patient's quality of life, how I care for them. And if you do that for me, I'm now spending more time, I feel better, I'm a happier individual. And the nurses say the exact same thing.
Same thing.
Help me remove the charting and the documentation and the tedious tasks. How can AI help me in that area? And so as we meet with various clinicians, it's a common theme. It's help me with my workflow, have a patient come into my facility, allow me to address them very quickly, to understand the situation very quickly, to then be able to make a very proactive analysis and diagnosis, and then to move them through the system quickly and efficiently and cost effectively. So if I can do these things, I am really meeting the requirements of the patient, the doctor, and the institution.
So I can see there are three stakeholders that you talk about: patient, doctor, and the institution.
Correct.
Traditionally, all three of them in this industry have been what you say slow at adoption of technology. Always said about them.
Correct.
And plus, it is an industry of compliances.
Correct.
So how do you see AI coming into picture from the adoption point of view and the compliances point of view?
Good question. It's an area where on the compliance side of things, people will say, I'm a little concerned about AI. Is it taking my job away? You know, that's the high level concerns. There are other concerns, especially with regards to the trust of AI. Can I trust it? And it's a big area of comments that come back from the HIMSS trade show, where they are meeting with a variety of providers, patients, caregivers, EMR companies, and they're all being asked very similar questions: is what's the best way to adopt AI? What's the best way for companies to consider incorporating AI? Well, again, predictive algorithms are very important. Well, how do I trust those algorithms? What's the guardrail, right? That's a typical question I will see and hear is, what guardrails are established so that I feel comfortable enough and trust AI enough to count on utilizing it for the benefits I know it can offer me. And the classic guardrail for any medical device manufacturer is going to be the FDA. So the FDA is the regulatory agency that approves all medical devices, pharmaceuticals, the whole thing. And it has to go through a process. Clinical validation is key. And so as AI is incorporated into these devices, they are going to go through a very severe clinical process and evaluation before the FDA will ever approve the product. And the evaluations are very involved. It's usually multiple clinical settings, multiple hospitals, and these hospitals themselves are having their own criteria for what is a successful result, and they have to come to a conclusion that if I compare what I was doing previously without AI to what I will show with AI, what kind of ROI am I going to receive? How is the patient going to benefit? And what workflow advantages am I going to gain? So regulatory is very important as a part of defining AI, whether it will be applicable and whether it will be something that will be trusted. So the FDA becomes a very important regulated agency involved with utilization of the rollout of AI.
So that means that any medical manufacturer who wants to start their AI journey, it should end in getting an FDA approval for a product that has AI in it,
Correct.
right?
That's correct. On the clinical side of things, again, we're
Or
just dealing with the clinical
clinical
side,
side of things.
right?
Yeah, of course.
And so as you look at that, thank goodness for the FDA. I mean, that is their sole call in life is to make sure that the efficacy of the product is, beneficial and safe. And I think as they go through their process of evaluation, having worked in the medical device industry for 40 years now, there are various classes of devices. Class 2 is your standard medical device protocol. Class 3 are for the ones that are much more invasive. So anything implantable within the body is going to be a Class 3 device, which requires even more testing and more validation and much more expense. So that's a key guardrail, but there are others as well, that need to be looked at. And validation along the whole pathway is very important. The HIMSS organization has quite a few areas where they focus on at their trade show, which is held in March every year. They focus on what's important right now and what trends are going towards the future with AI, and are we comfortable? Do we have plans in place in case there is a hallucination, in case there's a bias? What are the plans in place for the facility? And if those aren't well established, then they don't act as a very good guardrail. So those things have all got to be thought out before you implement and roll out an AI program. These hospitals are looking at those types of factors.
So any more things that you have in mind that you can share where if a medical device manufacturing company wants to start their AI journey, what are the things they should be looking at?
I want to reference one thing, and it's basically as we look at the incorporation of AI, the areas of governance and infrastructure are two areas that are pointed out constantly by the HIMSS organization as coming from their customer base, which are the hospitals.
Right.
And it's surrounding safety, it's surrounding, in this case, it's a culture of accountability so that everyone associated, involved with rolling out that program is accountable. It's identifying and defining, they list it as a digital trust and a digital intelligence, so that people are comfortable with understanding that this is here to benefit them, but there's also guardrails and safety mechanisms in place to make sure that things, if they do go a little sideways, that there are steps and plans in place to offset, any type of problem that may develop.
Right. So now coming to the opportunities, because there is a lot of data that is also getting gathered with the medical devices reaching the patients,
Yes.
and some of them are like wearables where there is 24/7 recording of the data. So where do you see are the biggest opportunities for AI and data in the medical device industries, and are there any exciting trends that in these technologies that you keep your eye on?
Yeah, good question. Right now, we have been so focused on in-hospital care. The trends in the areas that are important going forward now, for most of the studies that I've seen, are in telehealth and virtual monitoring. And in this case, what we're trying to do is have home to hospital and hospital to home monitoring. And we want to be able to look at vital sign information, any critical information that is utilized prior to them entering the hospital. And then as the information is collected and diagnostics are being done and analysis is being done, that information is collected, stored, and then available to the caregivers so that as they are sent back home after they've had their hospital visit, this information is accessible, whether it's from home or whether it's from the facility itself. And the key point there is, again, it's about efficiency. Ideally, we want to keep them out of the hospital. And if we can't do that, if they go into the hospital, we want to make sure that as they come out, that they do not get readmitted Because in many cases in the United States market, the insurance companies will not pay for a readmittance of the same problem that you were dealing with. And so it becomes a very large issue for the hospital who's trying to financially survive when there are constant changes going on in the US healthcare system and the reimbursements associated to a variety of tests. So as we look at that information, it's a challenge that has to be addressed.
Right, right. So there are always these use cases that come into picture. Like for example, you can do AI in contract management, something like inventory forecasting or preventive maintenance. So what are some of your thoughts in these areas which we talked about, or something like AI in supply chain management?
Sure. Just since we're on the hospital side, any of the preventative maintenance that AI could be applicable for is very beneficial to both the caregiver and the patient, because it's a source of frustration. And it's something that, as the caregivers are being told that there is a service issue with a product or there's an inventory related issue with a product, well, how do I take care of my patient? You're telling me we're out of stock, we're in stock, but we don't have the right parts, we don't have the right SKUs. It is a very big source of frustration, and that's within the hospital itself. Whereas on the business side of a medical device manufacturer, when they look at their internal businesses, and I think one of the questions you were asking about was like, if I'm looking as a marketing department or an operations department within a large medical device company, towards the end of a quarter, a sales quarter, executives like myself would be pulled in at the end of a quarter, because if you're a publicly traded company, you have to hit specific numbers, or what will end up happening is your stock price could be impacted, positively or negative, depending on how effective you were in managing your inventory. And so supply chain becomes a part of that process, because you're working with many suppliers. You have your own products you're manufacturing, you have third-party suppliers, they're using other third-party suppliers. So in my case, it was acquiring boards that had to be populated with chips, that had to work with 20 different suppliers of those types of chips, 4 different board manufacturers. And each of those companies themselves are trying to maintain their supply chain. And if there's a surprise that comes along the way, like COVID did, all of a sudden you've got this massive request for product. And how can you deal with that when your supply chain has been, run on Excel spreadsheets, or it's been run on very old archaic systems? And so as an executive, when I came across the end of a quarter, I was frustrated, because I would say, why are you pulling me out of my role in VP of sales or marketing and product management, and you're asking me to attend operations meetings and shipment meetings? Because I have relationships with a lot of these suppliers. And so I'm pulled in, and I'm ineffective then in doing what I need to do, my primary task, which is to generate the sales numbers to show the street that we're very positive. And each quarter, no matter how large the company is that I've dealt with, it's an ongoing struggle. And so, that kind of an issue can be resolved by putting together smart co-pilots, that I'm understanding that AI could develop to help the sales force do sales forecasting and demand forecasting more effectively. Big challenge in many companies. Many people will use CRM. Getting a sales force to adapt CRM is sometimes a major challenge as well. And what insights are you gathering? When you look at the clinical side and the business side, it's all about what insights are we collecting. We have all this great data, but we don't have the insight. And I think as an executive on the medical device side, I wanted to know the why. Why are we being successful? Not just that a computer spit out an algorithm that said, hey, your sales increased by 49%. Well, why? I mean, that's the question all business executives want to know. I want to know the why behind why we're successful or why we were not successful. And if AI can deliver that for me, it's efficient. It's operationally efficient. I'm saving costs. My productivity is dramatically improving within my organization or within my department specifically. And that, again, is what I find interesting about AI, is that if you're in sales and marketing, or you're in operations, or you're in engineering or manufacturing, every one of these areas can be optimized. And yet, again, we don't have the time many times to just sit back, pause, reflect, and think about how do we move this mountain. And
Right.
in many cases, AI can be the source and the result of effectively doing that.
Right. So I think what you are effectively saying is that the age-old problem
Yes.
that the industry has faced, and all the across the industries we see it with this particular problem of getting the right information to the right stakeholders to make the right decisions.
Correct.
That is something which you're talking about, which can be solved by using AI.
Absolutely. And in carrying that even forward, many of the hospital settings have disparate systems. And so these disparate systems don't necessarily share information effectively. And so right away, you've already run into a roadblock. I'm using an SAP system, and I've got AS400s as well. Okay, so on the hospital side, how are you adapting that information? How are you collecting that information, gathering it so that each stakeholder can access a variety of different databases? And how, when they do access that information, how effective is it at bringing it into one location and having AI then apply certain models to that, so that the information is readily available to the caregiver to make a decision. Same thing happens with large medical device companies who get acquired or acquire other companies. They may start off with their own homegrown IT database system, and then they add in SAP, or maybe they add in some other, well-known system. But now they've got 7 or 8 disparate repositories. Well, how does all that information get collated, and how is it shared amongst, the business leaders, so they can generate insights into their business? And again, that's the biggest challenge I see on the business side, is you have all this wonderful information, but what can you do with it? And if AI can take away some of these redundant tasks, some of the HIS information systems that I know that Konverge has worked on, to take millions of bits of data, OCR it into one format, and then allow a caregiver then to be able to say, oh, look at this, look at the trend that I've now noticed on my patient. And from this trend, I can make a better diagnosis, and I can improve the patient outcome, which improves the quality of care. And this is what the hospitals are all focused in on. But it's also the same thing businesses are focused in on, is I want good accessibility to data, I want accurate data, and then I want to be able to get business insights from that data. Any business executive will tell you that.
Right. So you made a very key point about for the clinician identifying the trends in the cohort, and in order to do that, you need to collect a lot of data first from the patients.
Yep.
And now we have these medical devices, personalized medical devices, which have come, like you have the Aura Ring, or you have the Apple Watch.
Yep.
And you have seen that on some instances, the medical devices collecting the personalized data. So now there is a possibility that you can give personalized care to the patients based on the data that is getting collected from all these connected devices.
Correct.
So there is a possibility of applying AI there as well. So how do you see that picture?
Yeah, it's an area of great growth right now, and the adoption is moving very quickly. So people who love their Apple Watch that has the ability to have a parameter like ECG or SpO2, or can monitor sleep patterns. These kinds of things. The consumer, on the consumer business versus the medical device business, the consumer business has grown rapidly. Because again, even though I've learned that some of the technologies aren't necessarily as accurate as the medical device technologies, they can, with the help of AI, provide more predictive patterns of recognition, because that's what we're looking for as a clinician. If we can see a pattern, then we can take that information and, based on other physiological parameters or patient history, we can combine all of that into making a diagnosis, or at least having an idea, a trend of what's going on with that patient. So I think that's very beneficial.
Right, right. Now, always it is like that, you know, if you have the medical devices, we also need to manufacture the medical devices. And when you manufacture the medical devices,
Yep.
you, as you rightly pointed out, that example where you had a lot of integrated boards, 4 different kind of boards that, so it's a very complex process of manufacturing on the shop floor.
Yep.
So what about the other manufacturing functions like these where AI can be used? So is there anything which you see here for customer support, marketing, also along with the manufacturing? So I'm just talking about different functions.
Sure.
Where you see apart from the operations where
Sure.
you can apply AI.
Sure. Starting with your point about customer service, questions have come up quite often with regards to my interface between my technical support people, my customer service people, and my customer is critical for customer satisfaction. And how do I improve upon that? What tools can I do to become more efficient and to be more attentive to my end user customer? So in this case, if it's a medical device manufacturer who has a hospital customer, the hospital customer will get a device, it will have a serial number, it'll have a part number, it'll have consumables that are going along with that. And a problem may occur. Well, as their biomed or as the person in charge of that department is contacting the technical support people, we want to be able to give that technical support person tools so that they can solve the problem on that one call, ideally. Customer complaints, are something that have to be registered with the FDA through an MDR reporting process. And so this information is something that's already in a format that the technician has to work through and has to process with. And yet, at the same time, many complaints come in, or the similar type of complaints, and yet a new MDR report has to be generated. And it's, again, redundant information, but many companies, unfortunately, try to tackle that problem because they're concerned about FDA by adding more and more people. So instead of fixing the problem, they're really creating another cost center, because now they're adding more personnel when they should be looking to figure out how to really address that problem, which is twofold. One is, I want my technical person to solve that problem on that call. And I want them to be able to import the information into an MDR report that is developed by their specifics, but AI can handle and address that format and that reporting back to the FDA, especially on similar type of things. That's just a customer service example. On the sales and marketing side, it's really important that the salesperson can respond to a customer immediately to a question that comes up. And what I find, having been involved in sales so often, a customer does not want to hear from the salesperson, let me get back to you. They want to know the answer right away. So if there is a chatbot, or if there is a tool that the salesperson can access readily that has the information available, because many questions are very similar, but the sales forces change pretty regularly. So unfortunately, the person who had all this knowledge is now gone. And now what do? Well, then the person who's involved in sales may have a clinical support person. That clinical support person many times can answer that question immediately. So the salesperson will say, let me get a clinical support person on the phone. Well, if AI can minimize the number of interactions to get the answer back to a customer, customer satisfaction is improved. And again, as a medical device manufacturer, I want the return customer. I want them to continue to come back to me. And I can only do that with better customer satisfaction.
Very true, very true. So that's one area as the example that you gave, that it can actually help the customer support executives to answer in a correct manner with empathy as well towards the customers, and get their problems sorted in a very less amount of time, with an AI assisted workflow, which
Correct.
they can bring in their day-to-day operations.
Correct.
So Bob, the last question that I have for you is that there is this common theme of data which connects all those disparate systems that you talked about, or the data that we are collecting from the medical devices, or the data that the clinicians are going to look into, which they have gathered over the time of patients. So what are some of the challenges you see the teams may face on this data engineering slash data access or privacy or the security, or bringing this data together for making or building the AI models?
Sure. I recently attended a HIMSS webinar which brought this question up, specifically. And I'll refer to some notes here just to share with you what their thoughts were. Again, they had talked about building a culture of accountability and digital trust and digital intelligence. Also, that transparency on the sources of the data and the evidence of added value and plans for potential errors and failures had to be implemented before you really rolled out that type of a program. Other feedback that they had mentioned was that the advanced equity of assets and outcomes and management of bias is in the underlying data sets. And then as far as data infrastructure, their feedback was that data management is the ownership of data, and that effective data mobilization, security, privacy, accuracy, and integrity of data are critical. And you should also consider the high infrastructure requirements that require a lot of training for the workforce, because that will delay the ROI. And so as they were listening to their customer base, which again is the hospitals, these were the critical components that they saw as concerns to rolling out a system. But also part of data engineering and data science is just that question of, can I trust it? And the advantage of utilization of data engineering and data science, obviously, is that we go through a lot of validation. We go through a lot of testing. We have specific individuals involved in each area of the process in the AI development, because we're working with the end user customer to develop that. There are tools out there already that they may already be very familiar with. And if they have those tools in place already, then we'll utilize those. If they don't, then we'll help them develop those tools. So ideally, we customize to the end user's requirements.
So the customization is the key that you are trying to bring out when you are trying to do the implementations.
Correct.
And the challenges being the data management, integrity, security, privacy, which you need to solve for.
Correct. Absolutely. Yep.
Yes. So thanks a lot, Bob, for traveling all the way from the US to Nagpur for having this intriguing discussion on how to apply AI in medical device manufacturing industry, how the folks are looking at it from a futuristic perspective, and some of the implementations you are already doing of AI for maybe customer service or maybe in sales and sales forecasting, inventory management that we talked about.
Yep.
And looking forward to continuously working with you on some of these use cases at Konverge, as well as, we wish you all the best for your India trip.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here in the land of tigers and oranges. Thank you.
Thank you.